So when you come in here on Friday, I will have one or two people responsible for making sure that they can get into the room next door where the videotape will be. The tape lasts about 35 to 40 minutes. Take notes on it because something concerning it will be on the exam 1 week from today. Whenever I come back on Monday, make sure you bring your hymnals to class because we're going to be going through Chapter 4, which deals with the book industry. 1 week from today, on the exam, if you're not sure about the specifics, go to the interactive syllabus, click on the project section. You'll notice that the exam consists of identification, true, false, multiple choice, short answer, and essay. And it is to be completed in a blue book. And if you're not sure what a blue book is, go over to the fine folks who do staff the Follow bookstore.
Do you want a big one or a little one?
I'm sorry?
You want a big one or a little one now?
I would, if I were taking an exam like this, I would probably use one of the bigger ones just because I found that it's easier to write on 8.5 by 11 sheets of blue book paper rather than the small. But whatever floats your boat, it doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't matter. But like I said, if I were doing it, I would probably use the bigger during the essay. I want to be very clear about this so there's no misunderstanding because we'll be rattling through a lot of information from Chapter 4 on Monday, and that is this. The short answer is just that, probably no more than maybe 2 or 3 sentences. And the essay should probably be a good solid 2 to 3 paragraphs. And what I've tried to do in the past, and I've done this since I think either 92 or 93, is to give you an option on the essay, because occasionally, and I know this always bothered me when I was an undergraduate and graduate student, occasionally something might be on an exam that we didn't necessarily know as well as something else, so I try to factor that out of the equation. When it comes to essays, you do have to answer 2 questions, but I usually give you 3 answers of which 3 questions of which you have to answer 2. And that way you can kind of wade through the minefields. And if there is a particular segment or area where you may need to list something, like 4 or 5 separate concepts, what I often did was to use some type of mnemonic device, try to remember maybe what the first letters of these terms were, put it in some kind of an anagram, and then remember it when the exam came. I'll tell you where this will come in very handy. On the second exam, which is all essay and short answer, I am going to ask you to list, describe, and give me examples of different advertising appeals. This is like Chapter 7 or 8 of your text. And this is where I believe there are 15 separate advertising appeals, and I will ask you to list, describe, and give me examples of anywhere from 10 to 12. So,
Of what? Of what?
Advertising appeals. I'm talking about something that would be on the second exam. If on the first exam something comes up where you need to know something about libel or the Little Rock newspaper war, and the only way you can remember is to maybe put it in 4 or 5 different words, what I used to do is to either memorize something or, like I said, put it in some type of an anagram form, put it into a word, and then whenever the exam was given to me or the blue book, I would write those initials down, put the definition next to it, and then by the time I got to the short answer essay, I would remember it. That was my shorthand way of remembering something. Now, with the term papers today, I'm going to take them with me. I'll probably grade them over the weekend while I am smoking a cigar, sitting by the pool, watching my wife in Kentucky. But you'll get all of those back on Monday. And what I have done, I believe, before I left last night, I went back to check the website. I believe that 24 people are officially enrolled in the class on the website, and there are 27 people in the class. If you are one of those 3 people, don't feel like jumping in front of a bus. Once I get back, we will figure out a way for you with 1 or 2 people who have already logged on to do it. We'll get you taken care of, which means that there may be a few of you who haven't gone to the website, who don't have the extra credit Prometheus credit, or you don't have the extra credit library assignment. And before I left last night, those of you who are in the broadcast performance or radio production course, or even a couple of you who are in my speech courses coming up, I went back and gave all of you credit for books that you had given me and put together the bibliography. So if you check the website for any of those classes, you'll note that if you are listed and if you gave me books or if you are logged on to the internet site, you have credit for all of that. That includes the proficiency exams in radio yesterday. I put those up early in the evening. As far as the term papers are concerned, here's what I want to do today. I want to go around the class and have each of you give me, because it's already 11 minutes after, I want you each to give me a brief synopsis of what you found. And you don't necessarily have to read directly from your paper. You can tell me what you watched. You can give me a couple examples of some of the stories that you've used. But in addition to being graded on the term paper, I think one of the things that I like to do is to have people talk about it for about a minute or so and give me their feedback. And I'll tell you where this comes into play. The second term paper is on the movie review. And before we start talking about the first term paper, let me give you a website which is not listed on the syllabus for some review purposes. Keep in mind, we always work on the Wednesday rotation, and I pride myself on talking about stuff far ahead of the fact. The second term paper, which is the movie review, is due Wednesday, October 11th. And I just want to do this very briefly. I don't want to get too far off the field, as is my wont to do. But the website that you might want to go to, among others, but this is one, it's like 6 degrees of separation. You might be looking for something on one actress and find something that they did 30 years ago. The website is, and I'll repeat it, is www.imdb.com. That internet address again is www.imdb.com. It is the Internet Movie Database. The Internet Movie Database. Now, in the next month, you are going to go to the theater of your choice. This is not a rental, by the way. You actually have to put your rear end in an actual seat of a movie theater, whether it's Movies 8 or 10 or whatever it is in Texarkana, or anything in El Dorado, or the updated Cameo in Magnolia. You have to go to an actual theater and watch a movie. And remember, when you go to the project section of the website, just like for the first term paper, I've tried to be very clear in what I want you to do. Don't just give me your Siskel Ebert motif of the movie. Give me an overall movie experience term paper. Here's where that database that I just gave you the URL for will come in handy. If there's a particular movie that you would like to watch, or if there's a particular movie that is currently being advertised on television, you can go to this website, go to the upper left-hand corner, put the name of the movie in, or the name of one of the stars of the movie, and it will give you a chronicle of that entire movie. For instance, let's say, to use the most obvious example, Brad Pitt was starring in something. If you didn't remember the name of the new Brad Pitt movie, you go to the Internet Movie Database, you click in the upper left-hand corner, type Brad Pitt, and in reverse chronological order, you will find everything that he ever did from 2000 back to, let's say, 1985 or 1986, when I think he was on Dallas. So you can find everything that you need to know about an actor, about a movie, about a director, or about a producer. And that background information will come in handy if you are watching a movie that's maybe been out for a month. You go to that website, you will find on the left-hand side different reviews of that movie. You click on that review icon and it will give you another list of icons from different newspapers or different reviewers, and you can get a good sampling of what other people thought. You can also get a good idea of a reviewing style, keeping in mind that your reviewing style will be different from theirs because I'm asking for the entire movie experience. Even though it may seem rather odd for someone in a term paper to write what the television advertising was or what the concessions were. Remember, those movie theaters are making money hand over fist when you get an oversized box of milk duds for $3. So, with that in mind, you have just under 1 month to prepare that. My experience has been of all the term papers, those are often the most fun. because people will not only tell me the movie experience, they will tell me about a bad date they were on. They will tell me about their car trouble. I had one person who will go unnamed last year. I wouldn't name him, but I can't remember his name. He told me just about everything about the movie experience itself except the movie. He gave me about 2 paragraphs on the movie. He told me about his car breaking down between here and Texarkana. He told me that he and his best friend went to Applebee's and what they had for dinner, which was very nice. I always appreciate a list including the entree and dessert in the term paper. But and as one student once told me back in 1993 before he graduated, he said, you know, Mr. Reppert, whenever I'm doing anything for you that involves research, I always look at it this way. It's words on paper. And I thought that was very profound. So whenever you're working on something on a deadline, just remember it's words on paper. Also, I didn't get a chance to mention this before, but I'm very concerned with term papers about paragraphing, grammar, and proper structure. Whenever we get to that reference page, you don't have to follow any type of firm APA or MLA style. Just make very clear what you watch and when. And then the big problem I notice on term papers is people aren't sure necessarily how to paragraph, so we'll have a page and a half of text without any firm paragraphing style. Use spell check, use grammar check. That's not cheating. That's analogous to using a calculator during a math exam. Use that to your benefit so I don't have to clean up your writing. And the advantage is you can go ahead and get a draft out of the way, clean it up once or twice, then give me 4 to 5 pages of brilliant prose, which I'm sure you will all give me. I'm going to, or maybe not, but I'm sure you'll be fine. And remember, I intentionally make the term papers the same amount of credit as the exam, 50 points. So that way, if someone legitimately has a problem on the exam, I can, with those term papers, if you're on the right direction, even though you might not give me exactly what I'm looking for, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But once you graduate, no matter what technology we might have in broadcast journalism, which is my specialty, the ability to write and the ability to analyze will stand you in good stead no matter what your long-term professional goals are. And I'd like you to get into that habit early on in this introductory class to be a good writer, an analyst, and watch and listen and view things in possibly a way that you may never have thought about before. With that in mind, I'm just going to start here with you and then work our way over. So we can have a quickie from each of you for about a minute or so, and then we'll be done. Now, pardon me, I don't know your first name, so give me your first name and just give me a brief synopsis of what you found. Go.
Hi, Deanna. I watched just the 3 network news broadcast one night each, and then headline news once, and I don't know what to talk about.
What were the lead stories on the networks? What were some of the things they were covering?
They did they would have a lot of segments on presidential stuff, and they all had Firestone, and that's really almost all they had in common. They had a lot of different kind of whatever they felt like putting in the stories, I guess.
Tell me about headline news. What were some of the things they were covering when you watched it?
Some of the things they were covering, they covered Firestone and heck, I don't remember. I have it all written down.
Well, but you can refer to your paper.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Go ahead and read from it if you want to.
Let's see. They did, like, the LOL Time Warner merger, school shooting guidelines. They had a bunch of lifestyle stuff, and their headliner of the
Give
day.
me an example of something that they ran on lifestyle.
They did.
This is what I'm talking about with softer features and stuff.
They did something with these 2 girls that are singing, and they're going to go out and tour with, like, Neil Young and the Pretenders or something, 2 Canadian twins.
What they usually do near the end of headline news is to have anywhere from a minute and a half to a 2-minute feature, either dealing with what she said with something in entertainment, or they might have something in lifestyle. And it's usually something that you might not necessarily see on network news that is lighter or humorous in nature. That way they can end the newscast on a quote, laughable note. All right, well, from what you saw from those newscasts, was there any newscast that stood out in terms of professionalism, one that you might watch more than the other?
Not really just specifically because it was more professional, but like, when I first started, I liked watching headline news because it ran through everything pretty quick, and you got a good overview of what was going on. But then after I watched the tapes of the other broadcasts, I kind of like, it was like, I guess, NBC with Tom and stuff, just because, like Dan kind of messed up last night, so that's why I didn't like him. But just the idea of the whole half-hour evening news thing, I liked that and everything.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
You're Dallas, right? Go.
I found that when I was watching the national news programs, they tended to be more literate and understandable. You could tell that the reporters were veterans in their trade and they were trained to do it. When I watched the local news programs from where I'm at, like the affiliates of ABC and NBC and CBS, the reporters stumbled over their words many times. The effects weren't as good as they were in the national news reports. It was just, you could tell that the reporters were either fresh rookies or just did not know what they were doing.
You'll notice, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do it all the time anyway, but whenever you are at the network level, the one thing that really, the one way you can really tell the quality of someone's writing is, and this drives my wife crazy when I do it, is to click on the closed captioning. And then you can really check the quality of somebody's writing. If you're not sure what someone is saying, that's also the advantage of videotaping something. I have videotapes dating back to 1988, and just to amuse myself on occasion, I'll go back and try to evaluate the quality of the writing. And if someone intends to talk too fast, I will click on closed captioning and try to get a feel for the rhyme and the meter. Excuse me, nobody else is thinking about it. And the way in which a person writes, because that's very important. Well,
I also watch shows like Good Morning America and The View, which are more... All right, I don't usually watch The View, but No, you didn't have to say anything. Your face said it all. I watched The View, which I'm going to tell you right now I thought was stupid. But
during their next hiatus, Lisa Ling is going to go to Iceland for some talent transplants. So go ahead. I can do an imitation of her, by the way. I'm happy to get a check.
I really didn't know what to write about them because it didn't appeal to me, but, I mean, they were understandable. They got their point across.
Go ahead.
They got their point across. They had a lot of feature stories in the one I watched. Barbara Walters. Anyhow, I watch PBS, and those are generally more to educate than to inform. All their stories, their programs are one subject per program. They don't have more than one news story. And I also noticed that local news tends to put a lot of feature stories. For instance, one of the local stations where I live has pet tales, and they give about 10 to 12 minutes on a person's pet and what it can do.
I'll tell you what local stations also do, even though we're not really dealing with that as part of the paper. Some local stations, in addition to having pet tales, which I think is Channel 6 out of Texarkana, some local stations also have the Adopt a Child program. Who would not like to adopt a child? But when you have 22 minutes for a newscast, is that really worth your time? With all due respect, with all the things going on in the Arklatex, do we really need to spend 3 minutes talking about some waif? Even though I don't mean to sound cold-hearted about this, there's a lot of stuff going on and there's room for that somewhere else. But to me, it just seems like hopeless shilling. The new person who is the news anchor on Channel 12, her name is Michelle. I don't remember her last name. They're starting to run features about her, trying to get you to watch Channel 12 News at 5, 6, and 10. They have pictures of her when she was a kid, pictures of her growing up in the Arklatex. So it's almost like, this is someone you can trust. Well, I don't need to necessarily see somebody when they were 9 years old as to whether or not they were competent or literate. Go ahead and wrap it up and we'll move on. Okay, go.
I watched ABC.
Okay, hold it. What's your name?
Mike.
Talk to me.
I watched ABC, CNN, and MSNBC, and they all led off with the subliminal advertising about the rats or whatever.
Yeah, the governor's campaign's going right into the dumper, isn't it? So, go ahead.
They blow that kind of stuff way out of proportion.
Here's the thing, and by the way, here's the thing.
Make a big deal out of that.
Governor Bush probably didn't know anything about it, and it's one of those things where you trust your media people to put together quality advertising, and something like this blows up in your face, and then it makes the candidate look bad. So I'm sure the governor is probably quite irritated over that because he didn't have anything to do with it. Anyway, go.
They also did big stories on Ford and Firestone fallout or whatever. And then they did smaller stories. I mean, they all covered stuff basically the same things, but they did it in different ways. Like, then ABC only has like one person in their studio or whatever, Peter Jennings, and then the other two had two. And like MSNBC, they just brought up a subject and like debated about it.
And again, this is the luxury of time. If you're a traditional entertainment network, a lot of local affiliates do not want to have a 1-hour nightly newscast because that takes away local advertising revenue from an affiliate. Like you're mentioning Peter Jennings. The reason there's not a 1-hour nightly newscast on ABC is that KTVS in Shreveport, Channel 3, or KATV in Little Rock, Channel 7, that would take valuable minutes out of their advertising revenue time. So that's why the newscasts are so short, and that's why television newscasts, whether they're local or national, are headline services. To get all the substantive information, you need to read a newspaper, you need to watch more television, or you need to go to an internet site. And the reason MSNBC can afford to have a debate on a particular topic is because they are a 24-hour news service. So what else did you see?
ABC and CNN, they basically in the 30 minutes covered about 10 stories with two big ones, like one for about 3 or 4 minutes apiece, and then smaller, and like some stuff they just brought up for like 15 seconds.
Yeah, somebody mentioned, I think it was Dallas mentioned PBS. The advantage of having a one-segment program, and PBS can do it because they have the luxury of time to see, you really get to know something in depth. And that's always the problem with television, and it's like the USA Today concept in newspaper. In USA Today, you are wedded to the space, and on television news, you're wedded to the clock. So it doesn't necessarily intentionally simplify things, because any topic in the world would not necessarily be black or white. There would be numerous shades of gray, but for the purposes of television, you usually have the story, somebody speaking on the pro side, somebody speaking on the con side, and then the news anchor or the reporter coming on for a stand-up. Okay, what's your name?
Right.
Talk to me.
Okay, I wrote about ABC World News, ABC Nightly News, and News and Headline News. And I opinionated myself on activities. I'm really teaching a lot. Very interesting.
He's a handsome man. Peter Jennings will always be high on. He will always be high on my good guy list because 7 years ago in our broadcast news writing class, the kids had to write a biography of somebody in broadcasting. And one of the students said, "Well, I'm going to write Peter Jennings." I said, "What are you doing that for? He'll never respond." Sure enough, he did. He didn't write her a letter. He actually called her, and her husband called her to the phone, and she said, "You'll never believe who's on the phone." Peter Jennings, "Arr!" And he talked to her. He talked to Lisa, who now lives in Pine Bluff, for about 15 minutes, and he was very nice. So he's a good guy. Go.
Okay, and I just think that ABC is much more mature than the other broadcasts that I watch.
Why?
Because there was not really any mistakes.
Give me an example.
More like on NBC, I noticed that like the camera footage was very blurry and the cameramen were not very stable with their cameras on certain stories.
What about the quality of the writing on ABC?
It was very articulate.
If something is done really well, I mean, I understand the point you're making. If something is done really well, it doesn't call attention to itself. But if you're watching local news, as was mentioned over here in the first row, you're going to have, not necessarily kids, but individuals who don't necessarily have the experience or the writing ability, and the mistakes are more easily understandable. What else do you find?
I read about the college, all the different stories on all the different stations, and my favorite story I brought up is the one about the college scholarships in California. I can, tuition paid for. And
What does that involve?
if they have a C average or above and they graduate high school, they get tuition paid
A
for.
C
We have that in
average?
the state of Louisiana, it's called TOP.
Yeah, I mentioned that too, because I'm from Louisiana, and Louisiana has tuition opportunities
Program for students.
Yeah.
You can get anywhere from tuition to $800 a semester if you have 3.5 GPA and you can complete a core curriculum.
Too hard to get though.
Not really that hard.
You take
I
all
didn't
your
apply for
classes
it.
and you study, it wasn't a big deal at all.
Is
Like,
that
I
what
gave,
you're on?
huh?
You can only
No,
do it in the state.
it's if you go to any in-state public or private institution, and I gave it up because that was all I could get. Tuition plus
I can tell you,
I got full aid.
I can tell you, SAU was very concerned about that, which is why it's ironic that fall 2000, it has the highest enrollment in its history. Okay, thanks.
Shreveport doesn't pay out of state either, up here.
Because
Yeah, Western
that's
Parish,
like
anything on a
Texarkana.
border, anything on a border
What about
state doesn't have to pay out-of-state tuition.
I think if you're from Texarkana,
The art plan
it's the same thing, right?
You're gonna hang in, but I did it. Like, I had a feeling like that.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing. Keep you far away, Debbie. Go, Aaron.
I watch CNN, Worldview, ABC, and CBS, and
Worldview is CNN, correct?
yeah.
Okay. Go.
And CNN was a lot more comprehensive and fast-paced. It was kind of hard to keep up with, especially when you're taking notes. And
Did you videotape it?
yes, rewound it several times. Probably watched
Hey,
it about 10 times.
let me tell you something. The best way to learn is to videotape and watch it over and over again. That's why I don't necessarily have a photographic memory, but I have a videographic memory. That's why if I can remember things going back 7 or 8 years, it's very easy for me to remember because I have stuff on videotape. Go ahead.
They cover the summit as their head story, and CBS and ABC were similar. They were easier to watch, had more feature stories, and I like Peter Jennings too.
Now, are you talking about the networks that more feature stories? And again, as I mentioned the other day, that's intentional because a news service like CNN or MSNBC or CNBC, they're covering some of the traditional news all day, so the roles of the network news have changed since the 1960s and 70s. Back then, quote, the dinner hour, that's when you got all the news, and now they've had to change, and that's why you get more quality features. What else?
Well, that was about it. One of the feature stories for ABC was cross-promotion for one of their new shows. I thought that's pretty funny. John Hopkins,
Cross-promotion?
or promotion, or whatever.
For what?
It was John Hopkins show, where it's like ER, but it's real live, where they go behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and of course, CBS was shameless with Survivor, and that's where the local news time came in. Remember the example I gave you in class, and it's on the course outline, where Channel 12 started off its newscast with a Survivor party. Absolutely, just absolutely shameless. Is it a traditional news story? No. Was it a news story in and of itself? Yes, because everybody was talking about it, but that was, like I said, pretty shameless. But Aaron did the right thing. Videotape it, watch it over and over again. If you were doing something in radio, it would be the same thing. That way you can log the stories. It's much easier to figure out the quality of the writing when it's done that way. Okay, directly behind Aaron. Go.
Brandy.
Okay?
And I watched MSNBC, and I also watched the local NBC station. I think it's on Channel 4. It's Clark. It's from Arkansas.
Clark.
Clark. K-A-R.
I know what it is.
How you say it then?
K-A-R-K?
Oh, Clark. Same thing.
Like Elf?
Clark.
Go ahead.
Well, they had like 3 headline stories, but the one that interested me the most was the one about the college coach not being guilty of the sexual charges that was brought against him.
Now, who was this? Who was the coach?
Paul Young.
And what was the school? What did he teach?
He taught physical education, and
Sorry.
he taught. Why y'all talking about the web? Okay.
Okay, well, look.
Bismarck High School.
And he was found not guilty?
Yeah.
Okay, what were some of the other stories he found?
And in the sports section, it was talking about Bobby Knight getting fired from Indiana.
Tell me about something that you watched on the network level.
About the campaigning for the presidential election.
Okay,
Also
was
about
this ABC, CBS, NBC?
This was CBS.
Okay, go ahead.
And they were speaking on the candidates who were running for President Bush.
Okay, directly behind her. Go.
Robert. Yeah. I watched CBS, CNN, and ABC. I got a question first, because
I might have an answer. Go.
I didn't understand it, because I did write about the thing with the rat. But see, when I watched the commercial, because they showed that.
Oh, are you talking about the Republican National Committee?
Because I watched CNN, and then they cut into the conference that Bush had. I think it was like at the airport or something, where he came in and was denying all the stuff, which I think is lying, even on from Texas. Is it the bureaucrat thing that, because I saw it and it flashed like real quick.
Yeah.
So
They were
that's why I was-
saying it would be the end of either bureaucrat or possibly Democrat.
Democrat. That's why I was.
Now, here's what's interesting. This commercial was getting ready to go out of the cycle of advertisements around the country. People in the Democratic Party knew about this because somebody who was an operative on the West Coast had videotaped the commercial and just happened to slow it down and saw it. So what they did was they alerted the Democratic National Committee, which made copies and distributed them to all the news outlets, and CNN apparently, according to its website, played the commercial slowly so you see it come up on the screen. Suffice it to say, and I didn't see the commercial, but I saw a freeze frame of the video on the website. Needless to say, this is not a plus. Currently going out to get that much maybe. I don't know. Anyway, continue.
But on CBS, which I watched the Evening News with Dan Rather, which obviously I can't say anything good about it because I don't.
Why?
He acts too robotic.
Robotic?
It seems like, okay, when he was sitting there and that
So on one extreme, you would have Dan Rather being somewhat robotic and mechanical delivering the news.
and then
And on the other side, you have perky Mary Hart on Entertainment Tonight being conversational with a teleprompter, who has made her entire life story out of being perky and reading off of a prompter. Well, that's fine.
well, in a sense, the reason why I say it's robotic because, like, if like I'm talking to you, my voice changes, like, gets louder and softer and all that. Well, he's
It's called
straight,
being conversational.
he's straight monotone.
Like these glasses are at 12 minutes. What's that go?
And plus, it's just like, it looks like he's sitting at like a bar or something instead of a desk.
Well, I don't think he's got a cold under this, but
You probably do.
And they talked about, of course, everybody's talking about the president and stuff, but I like the fact how the only thing they did do that I really didn't want to see on ABC with Peter Jennings is the fact that they had a poll with the New York Times, and of course everybody knows that like Bush started out real quick and he got a lot of good votes. And the
yeah.
polls they were giving out.
I just want to interrupt you for a second. To show you how volatile this election year is, I went to the Gallup organization website yesterday to check the tracking polls. After the Republican convention, according to the Gallup tracking poll, Governor Bush was ahead 55 to 39%, and that's not factoring in Ralph Nader and Pat Buchanan. The most recent poll has Gore ahead either 48 or 49% or 42. And even in that poll, it indicates that 20% of the electorate is volatile. They don't know where they're going to vote. So it could go either way. We're still 2 months away from the election, obviously. What else to find?
They talked about how, yeah, like you said, it was just dead heat. And the fact is that it seemed like the people, because they showed like people, and they asked people, you know, who they thought should be candidate or whatever. So it seemed like people just whatever's popular at the time. Because like you said about the Republican convention, how since he came out first, everybody wanted to go with that, and then just because he made a couple of good statements on issues and stuff.
Yeah, and I was mentioning Mary Hart a minute ago. I mean, she's not alone in being an effective teleprompter reader. If you watch the Democratic or the Republican National Convention, there was not a shred of conversationality there, because basically what they are, if I was presenting a paper at a convention on this, the first part of the title would probably be Exercise in Teleprompter Reading, and then go on to whatever the title is. Because none of these people, they would play this on C-SPAN, and you would have somebody who was the mayor of some city in the middle of nowhere come up at 4 in the afternoon, and 8 people would applaud. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I just want to say, reading it right off the teleprompter, it is extremely boring, and that's where you're getting that from Dan Rather, I suppose. How do you want to wrap this up, and we'll move on?
Okay. I like NBC. Everybody talked good about Peter Jennings, which I can do the same. And CNN, I like them because if I miss something, I'll eventually see it again, and it's always updated.
Yeah, and this is what I like about repetition. You cannot assume that everybody watched it the first time. For instance, Tim Russert, who's the moderator of Meet the Press, has his own program, which is repeated on Saturday and Sunday at 5 in the afternoon, and I think at 11 in the evening on CNBC. So that's repeated, just like the news programs, because they're fitting it into people's schedules, and the same with news programs. Go.
My name's Karen.
Okay.
I did CNN, Headline News, NBC Nightly News, and ABC World News Tonight. And my main focus is basically how CNN and NBC were very similar in that they present or lay out their program in a very straightforward, quick to the point fashion. And it reminded me of how, like, as if you were reading the newspapers, fact after fact, and how their anchors were very distant and unpleasant. And I'm like,
What is your definition of distant and unpleasant?
well, they just were just like what
Did they shoot you a dirty look? Or?
No, they had no emotion in there. They were just there.
Should they have too much emotion, though?
You
Because
know,
if they have too much emotion,
like I said that about them, and I went back into how Peter Jennings is very viewer friendly in that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'll explain that.
There's a lot to that.
And
There's a
it
lot to
made
be
it
viewer
easier
friendly.
for you to view. Because even though CNN and NBC, they packed in more news, that's probably more prevailing in current news, it was easier to watch ABC News in that it was friendlier and like the pieces or more pieces for it. Like Peter Jennings would stop and say little anecdotes and make little puns about the story. I
Which
know
is
that's-
intentional.
Yeah.
Which then, that's why, of course, that's why you have so many choices. Some people don't like that because they might feel it comes across as being almost too friendly or too conversational, where some traditional journalists don't like Tom Brokaw looking into the camera and saying, I'll see you tomorrow night. Because it almost is like, I'm the only person who works at NBC News, where of course there are thousands of people around the world. I'll see you tomorrow night. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. And I talked about how CNN and NBC were real choppy in moving from one topic to the next, and how ABC flowed into each segment like really smoothly.
So you're saying the transitional devices on NBC made the newscast flow better?
On ABC.
ABC?
Ran slow, but it was easier to watch. And what did I say about everything?
All right. Sam, I want to get through everybody by 11:50. Go.
Okay, I did mine on CNN, Headline News, ABC World News Tonight,
Speak up.
CNN, ABC, and NBC. And, let's see, what can I tell you?
I don't know. Tell me.
I noticed that CNN was more to the point than elaborating on most of their stories like NBC and ABC. I didn't like the angle woman for CNN either. I didn't like the background. Like all that news and stuff behind there, it just draws my attention.
Who was the news anchor?
I
you
couldn't,
didn't
I
like?
didn't spell her name, so I couldn't be on the paper. It was some Ching Chong woman. Let's just get a little bit corrected. I mean, I don't know, it's like Ching Chong, I don't know.
Connie Chung.
No, I think I know who you're talking about. I don't remember. I don't remember her name. There was something, Joey Chen probably knew this.
And also
You just didn't like her presentation, apparently. All right, keep going.
And also noticed like the commercials, like after CNN, most of those were like investment commercials, companies, like investment companies, hotels, all that kind of stuff where NBC and all that was like Coke commercials and stuff like that.
I don't recall seeing anything in the term paper about commercials.
Well, I'm just
Did
telling
you have
what I
something in
know.
here when I was asleep?
Yeah.
All right. All right, well, give me a quick wrap up and we'll move on.
I watch NBC better.
That's quick. Go.
All right, well, I watch NBC Nightly News, ABC World News Tonight, and CNN.
And you are?
Charlie.
Talk to me.
And I noticed, and I was looking for mainly the difference in the hard and feature stories. ABC, or NBC's features were seamless in that when they started with the hard story, it almost ended up a feature about something else, like with the Firestone story. At the end of the story, it's almost a feature about how tires are made. I noticed in ABC, they had the same tactic for bringing in a feature, but it was more defined between the hard story and the feature. So at the end, you weren't wondering what the point is.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'll tell you how else they do it. If somebody's talking about Firestone, for instance, there are one of two tacks that you might see in some of the stories. You might personalize it to a family who has been victimized by bad Firestone tires, or you might see a profile of a worker who is employed by the Decatur, Illinois plant, which is not too far away from where I grew up, where those folks are getting all kinds of criticism because apparently the statistics indicate that 50% of the bad Firestone tires are coming from the Decatur, Illinois plant. And that's a good example of how you'll take a hard story and make it into a feature when you personalize it to people. What else?
Also, I found NBC is open more to being accused of bias than ABC or CNN, in that when they reported the rat story, which was just ludicrous to me in the first place, that any of them made a huge deal about it. But ABC and CNN both reported the fact that when it scrolled down, it became the word bureaucrats. Well, when NBC reported it, they just showed that it said rats and that was the end of it. They didn't tell you that it came down with bureaucrats. So,
And it also shows you that there are some people in the Bush campaign who aren't necessarily staying on top of informing the media. That's exactly what happens. And if they were right on top of it, sometimes you can stay ahead of the curve on these stories by doing damage control beforehand. Some of the people in that campaign just didn't do a good job of managing, but you're right. Go ahead and wrap it up.
well, following that up, they went on to say all of George W. Bush's messed ups along the way, like his comment about the reporter, and just little things he's done to mess up his campaign, and it seemed really biased to me. I don't like Peter Jennings, but I feel like he has a better program.
Yeah, he's been a news anchor since he was like 26. He's been around for a long time. Monica, what do you got?
I think the most interesting thing I found was that I watched NBC News and Headline News and Sunday night, December 10th, and that's right when everybody found out that Bobby and I got fired, and it happened to be both of the news top story instead of the fact that OPEC increased oil production and that gas prices reached the highest level in 10 years, but they decided that the firing of the cook is more important. And
CNN spent 1 hour of prime time on this. And she's right, the OPEC story just went right into the dumper, so to say. Yeah, I'm sorry, what else?
okay, let's see. I thought that
Somebody's straining back there? Go ahead.
ABC News, when I watched it, had about 3 main stories, 2 of which were just basically centered on Firestone and Ford. And then they did a closer look segment, which went to the past and talked about Firestone, and it just reiterated, and I think it took too much time of it. Got boring.
Yeah, when you consider how many tires were just totally messed up, who is running these plants? It's really terrible when you think about it. Anyway, the Ford people are running away from Firestone big time. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Daniel, I watched ABC, NBC, and CBS Sunday night at 10. I recorded all 3 of them at 10 o'clock, and so I could compare them better. CBS to me seems to be like the better news station as far as visual and audio effects and just information-wise too. But NBC had a cool, NBC Sports is pretty cool because the dude he's funny and stuff.
The dude?
Yeah, I don't know his name.
What might that dude's name be?
I don't know, but he during the sports highlights and stuff, he like throw in clips of Bobby Knight throwing chairs and stuff. And so it was pretty funny.
Didn't have to go far to find those. Bobby's got a problem though. One of his eyebrows hangs down. He needs to do this. You got one of these. Look in the mirror. Anyway, go ahead, wrap it up.
But I just thought the sports thing was cool because a football team would fumble and he'd say, well, the coach ain't happy about that, and then he would like throw in a clip of Bobby Knight throwing the chairs.
Bobby Knight is a graduate of the Pete Rose School of Denial. Funny to watch. Oh, bro, I want to go get some bluegills. All right, fine. All right, we're going to run a couple of minutes over, so just be patient. Just a couple of minutes over. Okay, go.
Like I did mine on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Headline News, and out of all of them, I found that Headline News had more stories that were geared for people my age. It wasn't on the three major networks. Everything was geared more for a mature audience with mostly political and like one, I think it was no CBS. Everything that they did in the night that I watched was in some way politically motivated.
And remember that magic term demographic, because that's going to be so important when you do the second term paper. Each of you guys just give me maybe about 15 seconds worth. Go.
Okay, I watched August Night of Peter Jennings, CNN Worldview and Headline News, and I thought CNN Worldview sucked. It was horrible. Like, the footage, like...
Did you use the term suck in your
No, I
paper?
didn't. No, it was horrible. Like,
You didn't say broke wind, I suppose.
Like, their cuts were horrible, their stories, like the first story was 10 minutes long, where she stopped in the middle of these. It was horrible.
I'm sorry to give you guys short shrift, but I want to make sure that all you guys have an opportunity to talk. Go.
I watched NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams and CNN Headline
In the
News
second term paper, I'll start over here and go across.
and CBS Evening News. One thing I looked for was the way that they transitioned between articles, and I noticed that on one of the networks, CNN Headline and NBC Nightly News, usually one topic would lead right into the next. If they were talking about Firestone tires, it was kind of funny how the feature article that right after it was an airplane that boarded to take off at Kennedy Airport.
So it was a
The
natural
tires-
blend.
Pardon?
A natural blending.
It had a really good transition. And I like in the sports, in between Nightly News, Brian Williams, he was substituted with Lester Hall. I like the way he did his sport. It was kind of funny to me.
I didn't recognize Lester. He shaved off his mustache. He used to be a local news anchor in Chicago. I'm very biased because I've met Brian Williams twice. He is really nice and extremely funny. Sharp dressed.
But I like the way that on the sports section, it kind of gives you funny highlights from the game. One guy got injured and showed really bloody gory, his nose was busted, his eye, he has to have surgery on that.
The guy from the Boston Red Sox who got hammered with water.
And then I like, it was,
Okay, give me
the
one
golf
more.
shot that ricocheted off the guy's head.
Go.
That was good.
I watched CNN, Sunday, Fox News, Live, and Headline News. I thought they were all angles, professional, business-wise, but I thought it was very distracting with the news organizers on our conference, bottom of the screen.
A lot of people don't like that.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I mean, the main thing was the Bobby Knight story.
Okay.
I watched ABC, NBC, and NBC,
And I found that I like the morning news better than I do the night, because it seems to have more of a, not a happy thing to do, it's not as
Okay. 10 seconds.
I didn't know CNN and something over the internet. You had my paper, that's why I totally forgot. Is that it?
Well, I just don't recall having your paper.
I'll give it to you.
No.
Anyways, I like the news on the internet because I got concentrate more on.
At some point in the next few years, we'll probably have a term paper where you can actually watch international news on the internet. Right now, the news overseas is just too choppy with video.
I watch CNN Worldview and NBC with Rob Arbaugh. CNN Worldview, like someone's already said, it was very choppy. It crammed all of its work into 30 minutes. They had something called Worldview in a minute, and they talked about three different topics in 1 minute, and it was just
They just kept on and on.
That's almost where you have to videotape or you won't comprehend it finally.
I watch CNN headline news, ABC World News Tonight, and NBC Nightly News, and I myself like CNN better because it goes through everything